Namaskar to all. In this lecture, students, I'm going to continue with the synopsis of chapter number 2 as it is a lengthy chapter. So, a little brief explanation it requires. So, in the previous lecture, I told you till the common goals of 5-year plan and the establishment of Niti Aayog in place of Planning Commission in our country. Now, in this lecture, I'm going to tell you that after independence, that is after 1947, or if I say 1950, when our constitution was formed. So, what were the amendments, what were the reforms which were brought in our country to develop the major sectors in our economy? And the major sectors, agriculture sector and industrial sector, as well as the foreign sector. What the administrative setup of our country it has done to develop these three sectors in our economy. For the same, you should realize first, what is the importance of agriculture sector then. It was the main source of livelihood of many people. Around 75% of the people were dependent on agriculture sector. Then country during that time it has the largest share of contribution towards the GDP of our economy, and it was a source of raw material for various industries in our country. Even it was supplying the food grains to the foreign countries, and it was important for trade and services, that is for the tertiary development of tertiary sector as well. But what happened was, realizing certain problems of agricultural sector, that agriculture sector was completely dependent on the vagaries of nature, that is a monsoon. It did not use capital intensive technology. The basic problem was disguised unemployment, that is more people working at a place than what was required. So, considering the problems of agricultural sector, some land reform measures were introduced in our country. And what a land reform? Land reform means changing in the ownership of land from zamindars or from the owners of land to the actual tillers of the soil. So under this, various measures were implemented by the government, like abolition of zamindar was one of the major measure which was imposed, that to provide the land to the actual tillers of the soil rather than avoiding zamindari system in between. Then the security of tenure. Tenure means the farmers who were working on the land, they have rented that land and they were doing the cultivation work. So that security, they did not have that right of security. They could be evicted from the land anytime. So the government has provided them with some security number of years. Even, the government has imposed ceiling on land holding, that is fixing maximum limit on the land beyond which an individual cannot hold. If he holds beyond that, the government will take away that land and distribute it to the small and marginal farmers. Even consolidation of land holding, that means consolidate the small scattered land into a big land, so that modern machineries like tractors and everything could be used and the productivity per hectare can be increased. Even government laid emphasis on cooperative farming, that is farming mutually together for the mutual benefit of the farmers. Then even government has done has taken some technological measures, and under this the new agricultural strategy was introduced in the year mid-60s, and green revolution was introduced then. And this green revolution means using of high yielding variety of seeds, that is using of miracle seeds. And this green revolution, this technological measure, it is divided into two phases, the first phase and the second phase. The first phase starts from mid-60s and ends in mid-70s. And in the first phase, the wheat cultivation was bumper. And that is the reason it is also known as wheat revolution, or the phase of decentralization also it is known as. The second phase, it started from mid-70s and ended in mid-80s. And in the second phase, there were bumper cultivation of wheat, along with wheat, rice, maize, millets, and there were certain other crops also. And that is the reason this phase is also known as the phase of centralization. After Green Revolution, the government also tried, giving subsidies to farmers for various farm input, seeds, fertilizers, and all these things. But what happened as a consequence, that providing subsidies has become a debatable issue. Some people were in favor of subsidy and the others were against it. Then comes the industrial sector. The industrial sector, it was very, very important to develop the industries in our country in order to grow the GDP at a faster pace. So it was very, very important for our country to develop the industries then. So for the same, the government has, in our country, it has imposed certain, measures for developing the industries. But yes, even, developing industries will lay less pressure on land, because disguised unemployment was one of the common feature of agricultural sector. So those people can be diverted towards industries, and even it could help in development of agriculture sector. It could help in utilization of natural resources and increasing foreign trade, and even this can also help in promoting import substitution. That is, substitute the import by producing in your home country. So the development strategies which the government has used since independence in terms of development of industries was, it has adopted the policy of mixed economy, wherein private and public sector both will play equal role. There was expansion of public sector. The private sector contracted during that phase. There was strict regulation on private sector. Then, there was development of small scale and cottage industries, because these provide employment, these generate employment, and even these, these helps in equitable distribution of income and wealth. There was emphasis on capital good industry, so that, we do not import these capital goods from rest of the world. And the government has also promoted, the policy of regional equality. And if anybody wants to establish, any private sector wants to establish industry in a regionally backward area, so it was very easy for that person, for entrepreneur, to obtain license from the government, right? And even, the industrial policy of 1956 has come up during this phase. And under this, the industries were classified into three categories, that is Schedule A, Schedule B and Schedule C. Schedule A, wherein 17 industries which were exclusively reserved for the government. Schedule B, wherein 12 industries were left for the state, but yes, the private sector can also supplement with their role under Schedule B. And the remaining industries apart from Schedule A and B were completely left for the private sector, which comes under the Schedule C. Even the government has imposed industrial licensing then. So if any private industry, it has to establish, it has to expand, it has to diversify its role, it has to obtain licenses from the government. And even there was a legislative base for the industrial licensing. And under this, the three main acts were existing. The first one was your Industrial Development and Regulation Act of 1956. The second is Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act of 1969. And the third one is Foreign Exchange Regulation Act of 1973. So as a result, what happened was that Indian industries has done very good during this phase, but still there was a far cry, because the public sector, the government industries were running into huge losses. So as a result, what happened was that after the year 1990, the new economic policy has come up. So that we will discuss later on. Then if I talk about foreign trade, so what has been done in terms of foreign trade in order to restrict, the volume of foreign trade, the composition of trade, the trade policy has come up in the year 1950 to between 1990, and that policy is known as the import substitution policy. Under this policy, what happened was that this policy was actually divided into three phases. The first phase, wherein we call, rather than importing the consumer goods, you produce the consumer goods in your home country. The second phase, it is related to capital goods. Rather than importing the capital goods from the other countries or rest of the world, you produce the capital goods in your home country. The third phase was related to, technology. Rather than, importing technology related goods from rest of the world, you use indigenous technology, that is your homemade technology. So this policy was divided into 3 phases. So ultimately what happened in a nutshell, children, I want to tell you that, there were, before independence, we studied what was India, how it was, what was the economic structure of our country, various sectors and all that. And even after independence, when our constitution was reformed, so what happened, what policies, what changes, what reforms in the field of agricultural sector, industrial sector and foreign sector our government has brought in our country. So this is actually what we have studied in a nutshell so far. And in the next chapter we are going to study that after, so we have studied before 1947 what has happened in the first chapter. In the second chapter we studied about from 1950 to 1990 what has happened in our economy, how what changes has brought. Then now in my next lecture I'm going to tell you about after 1990, that is from 1991, further what changes has been brought in our country to develop our country, to increase the GDP of our country, and how much was it beneficial for our country. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. Happy learning. Bye bye.